Waiting for one more thing. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what part of the world you're in. And I know today we're going to have some people, it's their evening all the way on the other side of the world where I just was 24 hours ago, um, saying hello out to my friends in Uzbekistan, and especially in Tashkent. What we'll go ahead and do is we're going to kick off another session of the VO Weekly, the Venture Outfitter Weekly. I'm going to talk about what did I learn on the Silk Road, and really special program. I'm excited to be here. Everyone's been saying, dude, aren't you jet lagged? And no, I'm like super energized, and I want to talk about that. I want to share a little bit about the little of the energy, also what I think is possible with what happened. So howdy from Texas, especially to my friends in Assalamu alaikum to my friends in Uzbekistan. Welcome back to the Venture Outfitter. Thank you to DualWorks if you're looking for co-working or a point of presence in Austin, Texas. Anything from a mailbox on up, especially if you're out in the in another country and you need a point of presence. This is a great place to use it. Thank you for DualWorks sponsoring our studio here, and we're gonna hop right in. So I started last time. I'm working on this emerging framework of thought, and I want your input on it. But this whole idea, some people say, hey, why is it you went all the way to the other side of the world? What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. There's this idea that commerce engages us in a conversation. And then innovation's helping us solve problems together, especially when we have innovation in Mexico that solves a healthcare issue in Texas, or some other issue like that. But then the thing that's interesting is that there's this other thing that I think that is emerging that I want to start talking about more, about spirit is what connects us. And I don't mean to get woo-woo on anyone. I've definitely got a very spiritual background myself, but there's a really simple way that I am introducing into today's quote for the day. We travel because we need to, because distance and difference are the secret tonic to creativity. When we get home, home is still the same, but something in our minds has changed, and that changes everything. And I actually might say something in our heart has changed. My heart was moved by the trip, and I want to talk about that. But before I hop into too much of the story, before I get to the photos for the story, I'll share this. Sometimes people, some of the people might say, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. Well, what's interesting is there's scientific evidence of what we just said being true. This is a article that just came out about cognitive science, about over-reliance on English hinders cognitive science. Now, in the cognitive sciences, the author of this article is really talking specifically about how most of the innovation or most of the cognitive science work is being done in English. And because of that, and that's like in the deep sciences where they're paying attention to the language that you come from and stuff like that. But I think this is true in entrepreneurship. And because it's largely ignored and it's largely an English game, I'm going to point to some of the things that I learned. If anyone wants to have a deeper conversation about this, this is a great article to look for first, to be in conversation with me about. I actually had, when I was interacting with a lot of the Uzbeks, I was actually trying to figure out what is it that makes their language. Language informs how we think, and when we really want to start digging into kind of some of the underlying issues about how we're thinking, there's and how we actually therefore build entrepreneurship, right? There's some things that I really want to tie into. And I saw one of the many articles that I pay attention to. I pay attention to some esoteric kind of stuff, but this is one of the first things that came out, and I thought that I'd go ahead and share it because I think it's an important thing. Because it informs a little bit of what I'm going to tell you about what I learned from the Silk Road. And what we'll do is we'll go through and have a number of different statements about, I'll share some photos about, what happened. Then I'll have some conclusive ideas, or not conclusive, but, the start of some ideas that I think of what we can learn between Texas and Uzbekistan. And then we'll have a little bit of time for open conversation and see what comes out of it. I know that we have several of the people that I just met on the other side of the world present in our audience today, and also some that are going to be following on LinkedIn. So we'll follow up with that. But first off, it starts with these four people. The guys that are with me in SummerCon are the first two Uzbeks that I met, Sanjar and Kabir. And then Savara and Maftuna on the right are the four Uzbek fellows that we had. Starting in May, we had two Uzbek fellows that visited with us, and then two more that came later. And they truly made my experience special. And so I want to start by saying thank you to them. This last 8 days that I was in Uzbekistan wouldn't have been the same if it wasn't for them. And big shout out to the American councils for making this trip possible. But most importantly, by far, are these four individuals. I do believe that they're truly revolutionizing their country. And it was my honor to actually hang out with them, get to learn from them, share a little bit of insight with them. And I hope to actually get to interact with them much, much, much more, including going back to Uzbekistan. I've already made a commitment that I'm going to go back, and I look forward to it. You might ask, where did I start? We took a train for part of this trip. You can see that compared to the U.S. alternative, their trains are fairly modern. It was really interesting. We started in Tashkent. We did not get to go to Pokhara. This is actually, we used a graphic from a different thing, but Tashkent, Samarkand, and Kitab are the three areas. In fact, we were across the whole region of Kitob, which is one of them's a city, one of them's a district. I was in the district. So you'll see lots of different areas here. You can see Kazakhstan on top, Kyrgyzstan next to it, Turkmenistan, and Afghanistan, just to give kind of a sense of reference and stuff like that. But the country is exploding. These are different IT parks that are being rolled out across the country. Sanjar had told me, well, one of my hosts had told me that right now they're working on a 1 million developer program, that is to get access to software development to over 1 million people as quickly as possible. And you can see the commitment with facilities that they've purchased and built and stuff like that. In fact, there was at the IT park that I was in Tashkent, there were 4 buildings that had just been erected. They were empty because they hadn't rolled everything out yet, but it was really interesting to see the commitment just on the sheer volume of software development and software developers that are happening there. And we kicked off the first evening. They have an area that's called the Magic City that we got to spend some time in. It was really, really beautiful. You can see part of our team here. Here's the team and Sanjar's wife and one of the other Uzbek business leader program participants for the program that they were part of. I got to meet the governor of Kitab, a very, very nice man. It was very interesting. I presented to him, or he presented to me, I presented to him, and he's like, hey, Wayne, Kevin, you've got to cancel your appointment. You can't take the train back that you were planning on taking. You need to actually come with me, and we're going to go into the countryside, and we did. And we looked at also different opportunities about what might be possible between that district, not just around Tashkent, but also this other district, this other part of Uzbekistan that is much more rural, but also is where it's the, well, I called it, since I'm from Texas, I called it the pomegranate capital of the world. And I got to devour a number of pomegranates just because, as well as see some of the activities that they have, technology they have, as well as a lot of the activities there. They honored me by putting me in the following type of dress, if you can see it there, as well as we had a really special meal up on top of the mountains overlooking the valley below, which is way below this other area. And got to see a lot of the history in the area as well. Then there was lots of presentations. You can see one of the groups at Inha University that I presented to, one of the groups at the IT Park, another one at the IT Academy. That was quite interesting. And then as part of my work, just happened to coincide with the Undersecretary of the Department of Commerce Marissa Lago that was there, and I was the only startup person represented in the room. There were organizations like GE, Abbott Labs, HP, and organizations like that. And so part of what I did was most of the conversation was more for what will enable large industry. But part of what we were talking about is I was like, hey, large industry is great, but part of what we really need to help drive is the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So we'll be following up with that. A number of the corporations came up to me afterwards and said, hey, what you said in your remarks or my remarks, in front of the council or this council, I believe that we're going to get some support for because, if you want to drive an innovation culture in an entrepreneurial ecosystem and long-term stability in a people, you have to give them economic access, and this is one of the ways of doing so. And so we'll be talking about these concepts, not specifically about the details of this meeting, but more generally the concepts that are there, because I think that this is the sort of stuff that we want to advocate for even more. That all being said, what did I learn while I was there? So one of the first things is I was sitting there realizing this set of conversations were going on. And I was like, a lot of people were saying, Kevin, it's so cool you get to travel. So cool you get to travel. And I wanted to say, I said back to one of my friends, and then I decided to do an Instagram post about it. And you can find, if you want to find me on Instagram, it's just, Kevin Koym, first name, last name, and you'll find me. And I said, don't just be a tourist, be a diplomat. This is true for anybody that hops onto an airplane, goes places. You can be a diplomat. And it's really interesting about how that little bit of a shift, even for me, not that I've been in 27 countries in the last 6 years. I know something about this beforehand, but I'm starting to understand the role that any of us that are traveling can play in what we're doing, especially even if we're traveling just through Zoom. And the work that we're doing, like even with a studio audience, I see with the Czech Republic, I see a gentleman that's been spending time in Turkmenistan, all sorts of different places. One of our entrepreneurs from Washington State, several other people from Austin, one of our Russian Americans, and other Mexico's here, Philippines is here, Egypt is represented. There's a concept there that when you go to a different land, I'd really like to encourage, don't be a tourist, be a diplomat. Start really having what you're doing there, even if you're just taking a vacation, is to start building relationships. The world's up against these really severe situations. Like supposedly this is the least amount of security that we've had in the last 60 years, someone was saying, because of what's happening with the war. And so to think about is, how is it that you have a place in this conversation about creating, about peace creating, or peacemaking? And so do it. Second thing I'd say is 1 hour study is equal to a night of prayer. There's a real amazing focus on education in Uzbekistan. To the point that Uzbekistan is 95% Muslim, and this is the birthplace in the 1300s or so of the Enlightenment. Like when people kind of woke up from the Dark Ages, and part of what's driving this was an amazing cultural thing that I did not know. I mean, I knew about the Silk Road, I knew a little bit of history, not like I do now. I knew a significant more, but this idea about that education is so revered that it's almost treated like an extension of your religious practices there. But there's an underlying reverence that I really want to point to that I think is really interesting to start looking at practice-wise as we think about our own practice as entrepreneurs in working with each other, especially entrepreneurs that are committed to actually making a big difference in the world, making a change in the world. That's part of what this is pointing to, and it's pretty amazing kind of thought about how that might look, what that looks like. Another thing that I reflected on is Silicon Valley is still in the way. So here I am, an entrepreneur that got to work in Silicon Valley. Got to work for Steve Jobs straight out of college at one of his startups called Next. And one of the things that I realize is creating inaccessibility to entrepreneurship worldwide is these ideas that, okay, we've got to build a unicorn. And I heard it in some of the students that I was working with in one of the universities. They're so focused on unicorns that it feels like fantasy to them. They don't see the possibility of really creating a unicorn, although that's what they've been taught. And I want to remind you of kind of Austin history, for those of you that don't know Austin history. Part of what we started looking at years and years ago, and this is what shifted the conversation in the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Austin, was we started saying, hey, you know what? If a handful of you guys have early exits, that is somewhere between, there's a book called Early Exits by Basil, and I always forget Basil's last name, but Early Exits, the idea is like where you exit your company, you sell your company for $10 to $30 million. And some of you won't even plan on selling your company, but you might sell your company for $10 to $30 million. And what's interesting about that amount is that's enough money that you're set for life. And then on top of that, on top of being set for life, the really wild thing about it is you're going to already affect your community, because they're going to be like, well, wait, Melvin actually sold his company for $10 million or $30 million, and then goes over and over and over, versus taking a risk of building a rocket that goes to a certain level. And there's nothing wrong with building a unicorn. I'm not saying, sometimes when I say this sort of stuff, people are like, Kevin's anti-unicorn. No, Kevin's not. Kevin just knows that to get to a $1 billion company, you got to build a $10 million company first. Otherwise, you will never get to a $1 billion company. And when you start thinking that way, you could build a $10 million company within 3 years without a lot of outside investment. And that's possible in Uzbekistan, and that's possible in other places. We saw this years ago in Chile, that as soon as one of the companies, as soon as Mercado Libre opened up in Chile, that all of a sudden, and those guys made, like Groupon bought them for $10 million. It was just enough that, actually, I hope I'm not mixing my names up, because as I think about it, I didn't write this down beforehand. But there was this one company that got bought by eBay for like $10 million. And it changed everyone's mentality in Chile, because wait, if these two guys, and I forget their names, and I used to know them, I've had drinks with them in Santiago, as soon as they sold their companies, all of a sudden something shifted. So let's not get caught up in Silicon Valley's thinking, because Silicon Valley sometimes is in the way. Silicon Valley being this idea that we just have to build a multi-billion-dollar company and everything's going to be fine. Now, that being said, I also challenged my friends in Uzbekistan as well, from the idea that if a little place like Estonia, which has only got less than 2 million people in it, and is a former Soviet country that was, used to be part of the Soviet Union, if they can produce 11 unicorns, then certainly Uzbekistan can as well. And there are companies that are on the way to that. There's a $400 million company that's on the way to that and stuff like that. So it's possible, but the main thing is, don't get deluded by Silicon Valley thinking that that's the only thing possible that will actually change your life and change the life of your community. Next thing is, pull the trigger, ride the bullet. I am always reminded, though, the positive side about Silicon Valley is people will do in a day in Silicon Valley what it takes 3 to 4 days to do in Austin, where it takes like maybe a month to get certain activities done. And I'm going to pick on Columbus, Ohio. People that there is something about, and the most important thing is it's the style of thinking. Hey, wait, we can figure this out today, or we can figure this out within the next 3 days, versus, hey, I'm considering. With a lot of the questions I received from the audiences that out of the 5 big groups that I interacted with, I always take questions first, because I like having a real communicative kind of interaction. And I can always tell, like, and this is not unique to Uzbekistan, but a lot of times people think, hey, it's going to take me a month before I get this certain set of things to do. And the main thing I'm saying is, and the challenge is, a lot of times you can think of a way of figuring something out within a day or 2 to 3 days if you're in Austin, Texas versus Silicon Valley, versus waiting for a long, long, long time. So I say the Texas way of saying that is pull the trigger, ride the bullet, figure it out in a day. Don't push yourself too hard, but there's no reason to be thinking about something for a long time if you can actually test it and roll it out within a couple of days. Next thing was there's this concept called the Danish Balish. What is that? That was I noticed that a lot of times I would be speaking with a group, and then all of a sudden I would hear these two words. I was like, I stopped people. I was thinking about, hey, social capital is more important than financial capital. What is social capital? Social capital is what we can actually build together. And what's interesting about that in building social capital with each other, especially in Austin, how is it Austin became Austin entrepreneurially? It's because we would work together side by side as two entrepreneurs, or multiple entrepreneurs. And the funny thing about that was that's what created this whole really strong network of people that even though we didn't have a lot of investment and we didn't have a lot of investors, that people were actually able to build businesses really quickly. This is what shifted Austin, especially in the years between 2003 to 2009. The concept there, the words that I was hearing every time they were translating me was Tanish Balish, the network. So they already had this concept of that. And Uzbekistan is such a heart-centered culture. People really care about each other in a way that is very akin to why did I come back from Austin? Why did I come back to Austin from Silicon Valley? I wanted to be in a community where people really cared about each other. They worked with each other. Social capital is more valuable than financial capital. And the main thing to know about that is that it's because if you have social capital, you can get things done. And I just remind my friends in Uzbekistan and around the world, your network is more valuable. So build your network. Your network's more valuable than having access to an investor who's going to just write a big check. And the main thing is exercising our networks. And that's partially why we meet together as a community, so that we can actually build network together and then help each other. And the final thing I'll say is the body keeps the score. So in the picture you're seeing, I was giving a speech at this one place called IT Academy. I always mess up the name, so I'm going to skip the first part of the name, but there's the IT Academy. And beautiful facility. Thousands of students are coming to this academy to learn logistics, artificial intelligence, software development. They're doing some really impressive stuff about how they're training people to become software engineers. I mean, it really, like if you're sitting on your laurels here in the United States, these guys are going to either be working with you or you'll be working for them within a decade or two. Certainly within a decade, certainly within two, because of what they're doing. But what was interesting about presenting here was initially, as I came in, I had been told that people would speak English, and that that we had kind of a B-level English speaking. And the truth is, the person who briefed me didn't have the full story, and most of the students that are in this audience of more than 50 or so students, and these are all university age men and women. Most of them didn't have really good English skills. And what's really interesting about that is all of a sudden, when you leave the country, when you leave the U.S., or actually when you leave your hometown, something happens where your awareness goes way up. It's what's tied to the quote that I actually used earlier, that your awareness goes way up because you're in a different place and all that sort of stuff. And I realized all of a sudden, these people don't understand what I'm saying. So I stopped, I pulled the person who was supposed to be translating for me over, and I said, hey, what's going on? What's going on? Oh, they really don't know that much English, and which is different than what they, so I grabbed a person to do translation, but I noticed that the most important thing was my awareness, and this is true for all of us, You just have to become aware that you have this. My awareness was that a lot of the people were like this. You can even see it in the photo, right? They're leaning over like this. Challenge to everybody. If your body is like this, more than likely what's happening is there is something that's blocking you from being able to see opportunity. This body position is indicative of, feeling down, looking down, shoulders down, all that sort of stuff. And so even before we really could figure out how, like when I was trying to get the translator and I was waiting for someone to come over, the one thing that I was able to do based on my Aikido background, studied Aikido, a martial art for about the last 25 years, was just to get people to work on how their body posture was. This body posture thing, you can communicate across all sorts of other languages because it's fundamental. It's fundamental biology. And part of what I'm really pointing to is you can't see opportunity if your head's down. I mean, it's a biological fact. You have to open up. We brought that up, ended up sharing that knowledge. It impacted everyone in the room, and then I once I had a translator, we ended up coming up with a couple of different examples where they really started saying, "Hey, I really want to know more," blah blah blah. And there's an example that I'll write up at some separate point. I'll tell you I'll just give you a taste of it. One of the guys was saying, "I'm really interested in like doing stuff around Spider-Man and animation and stuff like that." And I was able to connect him and his interest to one of our companies out of Brno, Czech Republic, which was really great because here's this one student who's now going to be attached to one of our startups in our community because of his historical interest in animation. Really interesting stuff. We'll talk more about that as I'm going to let that story kind of sit for a little bit, and we'll have something to harvest to talk about in the coming weeks. But, it really is about the people. The relationship and relational cultures, like is true is in Uzbekistan, are really, really, really powerful. And I'm really hopeful for what we're going to get to build together. There's an amazing amount of follow-up that has to happen for the opportunities, from everything from the Venture Capital Association to the IT Park to the IT Academy to working with one of the other venture capital companies to just the number of companies that I immediately saw an opportunity to plug people in. Some of you already benefited from these connections, and there would be more to come. But what I figured I'd do is I could tell you a lot more. I could open up other photos and stuff like that. Lots of different stories happened over the last few days, but I thought I'd open it up to the community and see if there were specific questions or anything like that that people like to talk about. I know that some of our students wanted to join from several different groups, and I think that they might be sending me messages right now telling me, "Hey, we can't get in for some reason." So I'm going to reach out to them. You'll see my eyes going back and forth to make sure I follow up with them and connect with them on Telegram. But let me just open it up for questions. If anyone has questions about it, or if they'd like to reflect on any of the stuff that I said about how we can take advantage of these kind of connections. I know we have a couple of different people that are in the audience, in the studio audience as well. And there's a number of people that are watching on the streams as well. But Dan, you and I just met. You're opening up a Chamber of Commerce there. I'm just wondering if nothing else, I'd love to talk you into. Tell us about the region from your point of view. Tell us who you are, all that sort of stuff, and kind of, what would you like to share about that part of the world? Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you. So you can hear me, yes?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I just have to apologize for the angle because I just moved to Tashkent. My stuff is coming from Tajikistan. I was home in New York for 2.5 years unexpectedly because COVID hit. So all my stuff is in Tajikistan, and I'm still waiting for some of it. But so I have this angle right now because I have two screens. So if that's okay with you, that I have this
That's
angle.
perfectly fine. I
Oh,
totally
great.
understand.
Okay, well, it was great to meet you, Kevin, and some of the people you're working with. So I'm actually from New York, but because I studied Russian in college during Perestroika and Glasnost, among other things, I wound up in Central Asia. So I worked twice in Kyrgyzstan in '90s, and I was in Tajikistan for 10 or so years. And among things in Tajikistan, I was on the board of directors of the AmCham, the American Chamber of Commerce. And I founded something called Global Entrepreneurship Week in Tajikistan. And this GEW is in 200 countries. And also, I founded Women's Entrepreneurship Day. And so I was heavily involved with the startup ecosystem there. And the main issue here is that I'm in Tashkent right now. It was a quick decision to move and to stay here. We're starting a new business association called IUUBA. That's Israel USA Uzbekistan Business Association. And actually, to Kevin's point, um, Uzbekistan and Central Asia have a very ancient Jewish community called the Bukharan Jews. Their language is very similar to Tajik, which is very similar to Persian. Uh, and I'm not Bukharan, but I actually in Tajikistan learned Persian. So a lot of people think I'm Bukharan. But in any case, there's probably about 100,000 of these Bukharans in New York and 200,000 in Israel. And I joke in New York, all my haircutters are Bukharans. But in any case, our founder is actually from Bukhara, and you can go and see the Jewish Quarter in Bukhara if you ever visit there. Uh, so I'm talking about mixture of religions on this in this part of the world. Just sorry to interrupt. There's also there was Hindu influence here. There was Buddhist influence. If you go to the south, you can see Buddhist stupas in Uzbekistan in this region. There was Manichaean Christianity and so on. So there's a lot of
Yeah,
mixture.
it's really interesting. I mean, that's the whole idea too of I think one of the reasons that they were so successful from a, the like the Uzbek people were so successful. I think that they mentioned there's 130 different nationalities that are represented
There's
in the country.
loads.
And when you think about it, like what's represented by the Silk Road, right? Does everyone know? The whole notion of the Silk Road is this is where all the trading happened. This is all the trading happened, and so it's natural that you'd actually have such a nice, very peaceful, interactive mix of cultures there. So it's
Yes.
amazing, like and
So
and
I just
always
yeah,
greeted
it's
with hand
yes.
over heart.
And it's yes, it's and so just to we our Bukharan friend, he was born in Bukhara, grew up in New York, moved to Israel 2 years ago because he married an Israeli woman, and he works with early stage innovative tech companies and so on. And the Uzbekistan came to him and said, "Well, why don't you bring this technology to Uzbekistan?" And he thought, like everyone, it's like the old way. So basically, the new president came about 5 years ago and radically opened up the country. Uh, and so he came to an investment forum and he was shocked. Well, this is completely different from what I remember, what I expect. It's very open. They're moving forward. They're doing reforms. I would just tell you, between 2016 and 2017, when the new president took over, I've never seen a country. I mean, the change in 1 year was astronomical, and I haven't been in 3 years, and the change has been even astronomical since then. So basically, the main gist of what we're going to be doing is facilitate the bringing of Israeli technology in various sectors. Agriculture is the main sector that we're going to focus on, but could be in 20 different sectors. To Uzbekistan at the invitation of Uzbekistan. And the trilateral part of it is, we have Americans involved like me, and we use American financial models and structures. And Uzbekistan, we have access to a farm in the east that will kind of be like an R&D center that these guys can prove their uh, uh, proof of concept of the technologies, so to speak. So the first one, I'm not involved in this, but the team is raising money, looking for investment, and so on, and we'll have member companies. The first project will be a project to increase the speed of the animal feed growth, while it's also be more nutritious and cleaner. So these are the kinds of things we'll be doing, and there'll be some possibilities to export things as well from Uzbekistan. I should mention though that it doesn't have to be that we only have, Israeli members. The investment is coming from outside Israel, and it doesn't mean that it could just be tech, but that's the general thing. And this the last thing two things I'll quote because I don't want to hog it here. I put on my LinkedIn and on my CV my mission statement, which is, you know, let's see if I can remember it. Bringing new products and services to new markets to sustainably solve societal problems. That's one. What I should put two, which I haven't, which is kind of what I was doing in Tajikistan, is that we don't have to bring from the outside, but that helping the locals to innovate and come up with their own solutions to their problems. And so I just want to say that I've been in this region off and on almost 30 years, and I first visited Uzbekistan 10 years ago. And I can tell you, just from 10 years ago in Uzbekistan, a huge change. I mean, so many more youth are engaged. So many more. I hate to say that speaking English, but okay, speaking English, but that's not what I mean. I mean engaged with the international community, engaged in the startup sphere. This didn't exist here 10 years ago. So there's been a big, big movement. And the last, if you will call me one last thing I want to say. I don't want to say that Uzbekistan is heaven, no, but that's why it's good. It's one of the top places I would be in the world. Why? Why did I learn Russian during Perestroika? Russia, new market. I actually learned Farsi in Tajikistan. I shouldn't say this for Iran one day because Tajik and Farsi are the same. But why? So why am I here? You're going to find few places, 35 million people in Uzbekistan, in the five stands of Central Asia, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, all have doubled in population in the last 20 years, and they may double again. So you have almost 80 million right now, huge youth bulge, contiguous land masses just here and sub-Saharan Africa, huge youth bulge. Kevin made the point. When the Muslim world was at its height a million years ago, 1,000 years ago, the top scientists, we can name 10 of them, they all came from this region, including Al-Khwarizm, which is the algorithm. Now, during Soviet time, and I certainly am no fan of the Soviet Union, I visited it, hated it, but they did have a good influence on some things, including education. Tashkent itself was capital of Russian Turkestan during the Tsarist Empire and during the during the Soviet time. Okay, there were a lot of good research institutes, scientific research institutes, STEM, during the Soviet time that kind of closed after independence, but they have not just a 1,000-year heritage, but 30-year heritage. They just won the World Chess Championships, Uzbekistan. It was big in the news here. And they only opened up 5 years ago. So this region's been closed to the world since the Silk Road fell off, and then the Soviets and everything. 5 years they've only opened up Tashkent. So all the stuff that's been done in the rest of the world in the last 50 years or 100 years, they're just starting in the last 5 years. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, middle-hanging fruit, and I'd say high-hanging fruit too. I think it's one of those places, if you're looking for new opportunities to do a lot of things, this is a very good place to come to. It's very safe. It's quite open. And I'm planning,
Yeah,
hopefully,
that is one thing
yeah.
I will say is I felt very safe the whole time I was there. I've traveled to other countries in the region, and where different situation totally, but Uzbekistan was very, 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 very peaceful, and you could
So
actually
thank
feel
you.
it, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, Daniel. Thank you for the
Well,
insight
that's
into
the
the.
last. So sorry, that's just
Oh
my
yeah,
last bit.
sure,
So
sure,
my only
sure.
last thing would be that if everything goes well, I'm self-financing right now, but I plan to be in here in Tashkent a long time, and I will be the managing director for Uzbekistan and Central Asia, etc. But truth be told, much as I love Central Asia, I still hope to travel the whole world one day before I leave this earth. So it was Kevin. That's the last of my bit. Thank you for putting my LinkedIn. I welcome you to connect with me. And and last thing, the guys you met were excellent. Those four people that you showed
Yep.
on so I'm in touch with them. So I'm not hogging it anymore. But thank you, Kevin.
Wait, I know it's interesting. So we have a couple of different for everyone else that's listening in. We have I know there's a number of students that everyone's like they're actually in classes. One of the guys right now is just messaging me back. I'm like, hey, Elba, come on in. I'd love to have you beyond knowledge or something. He's like, I can't. I'm in class right now. So part of what we'll do is we'll actually have some of the startups in a more formal kind of way come on and pitch. At this moment, just I think it happened all so quick. In fact, each one of the groups is like that I presented to has been self-organizing. We started a Telegram channel, which is essentially for those of you that don't use Telegram. Telegram is just like WhatsApp. It's got a few more features for actually organizing groups. In fact, because it's so much more robust, we might actually take that over and be using that for TechRanch and let go of our WhatsApp group. But I know there are a lot of different things. Let me ask the other parts of the world. Does anyone have questions they want to ask about Uzbekistan while we have some opportunity to do some interaction back and forth? David Nichols, our American based out of the Czech Republic. Why don't you join us? Yeah, come on in. Join us. And yeah, it looked like you had your hand up. Please go right ahead. Oh, let's see. It looks like David. I don't know if you're coming on to do that, but go ahead and join us. Or you had your hand up a while ago, so let me know if you.
He says he can't unmute for some reason
Oh, I
there.
can't unmute. Okay, got it. Perfect. Well, I tell you what. What we'll do is sorry, but this says the host won't let me unmute. Maybe Jello, if you could check on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I have already asked him to unmute. I don't know why it's not working.
Okay. Well, David, if you have a question, what's the structure of the medical system and social support? I'm wondering if we have someone that would have the details of that. Denise, would you have details about the structure of the medical system and social support?
Do you mean me?
Yes, I'm just wondering. I don't know how long you've been there in Uzbekistan, and so I was just wondering. Perhaps you have like some insight about those type of things.
Well, yeah, I'm staying in Uzbekistan since March, and yes, I feel the same. You mentioned like social capital. But I'm not sure how it works in long distance, in long term, because now my staying here is not so long, so I will see.
Yeah, it's interesting from how since you've been there for a short period of time, but you've been there long enough to kind of really get a sense of how things are. It is interesting about the how that feels. I got a question from Christia in LinkedIn. She said, "I'm interested in understanding the Uzbek heart-centered culture shows up in business relationships and communications." Denise, if you have an opinion about that, I'd love to hear it. But also, Christia, one of the things that since she's listening through the stream on LinkedIn, one of the things that I've noticed is in everything that was happening, people are always very considerate. There's a lot of interaction back and forth about how people take care of the relationship. It feels like being in Mexico on steroids. And what I mean by that is Mexico is very heart-centered, and there's a lot of concern for the relationship before there's business. I kind of felt that same exact way. Now, I haven't actually turned this into a contract yet, but I think that there's going to be at least 4 different opportunities that are going to happen between the Tech Ranch organization and several different groups there, as well as there's probably going to be 4 or 5 other things that happen as well. Hey, wait, Sanjar just joined us, so I tell you what we might try to do is ask the same question to him. Sanjar, can you come off of mute and then we'll switch over to come off of mute. We're going to ask this question to you. I know you just got to hop on, but if at all possible, please join us. So the question, since you work for yourself, the question is, I'm interested in understanding. This is from Christia. I'm interested in understanding how the Uzbek heart-centered culture shows up in business relationships and communications. Give us an idea about that.
Hi to everyone. Hi.
Welcome. Yeah, you missed
Hi,
all the
Kevin.
most important thing where I was
Yeah,
talking about
sorry.
how much I miss and love the 4 team members that made my life so easy over there.
Yeah, sorry for that.
So
I was.
no, it's okay.
Yeah,
I'm putting you on the spot right now. I know it's late there, and having a family, it's difficult to interrupt a Thursday evening. But I'm glad to have you here.
yeah. Thank you.
But yeah, how does the heart-centered culture show up in business?
Mm, of course, business in Uzbekistan different from other countries. As I said before, that people don't do business with papers. They just trust themselves. They just trust their words. And people mostly do business with their relations, like friends, uncles, or friend of friend. And they do business if this business actually working in market. There are no so many startups. I mean, just copy pasting, just like in China, if you see something, you just copy and try to do this in a better way.
Well, it's interesting because I think that I think we'll see some of the, a lot of what Sanjar is referring to is a lot of times one of the fastest ways of doing market entry in a home market like Uzbekistan, or I saw this in Chile as well, was you recognize a business someplace else that is being successful. The example I gave earlier from Chile was how about copying, copying something like Groupon, and there ended up being like a copy of Groupon that then ended up selling really quickly to Groupon, even it was just a direct copy. There's a couple different examples of that, like payment platforms. There's a Uzbek Shopify that in the last 4 months has gone from 0 to 700 stores overnight. It's quite
Also,
interesting. So
Uzbek Uber.
yeah, which one's the Uzbek Uber? What's it called?
It was OK Taxi in Samarkand. In Tashkent, it was My Taxi, and also Yandex Taxi.
Yeah,
The interesting thing is that you pay with cash.
Wait, so you're able to tap into the local flavor of what's needed. You're paying in cash in Uzbeks. By the way, I should have left you all the Uzbeks that I exchanged for. I'm sorry that I didn't. Well, so I have to come back to spin the Uzbeks that I brought all the way back home. Or the Uzbek Sum, that is. That Sum is the name of their cash equivalent. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's interesting. Anything else, though? I mean, at the birthplace of the Silk Road, what do you think the future holds? I know that that the country's only been open for a few years, but it's obviously changing
Yeah.
really fast. There was lots of construction, lots of people going to schools that were extremely new. What do you prognosticate for the future? What do you think is going to happen in the future?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's our market opened widely from 2016, and a lot of investors coming. mainly from Korea, from China, East. And I think in the future, our market will grow up like a rocket. I think so many constructions going on. I mean, people coming to Uzbekistan from Russian, you see, and maybe they will stay here in Uzbekistan more than 1-2 years. I don't know. Maybe they will leave. And there are a lot of interesting things in Uzbekistan. I mean, natural resource, gas, and you know, and I think so many IT guys coming to Uzbekistan. Maybe there will be a lot of startups, and also here in Uzbekistan, the car manufacturing companies like Volkswagen and also Mitsubishi will come soon, very soon.
Wait, it's
Mm,
interesting. One of the things that surprised me being from America was there were like like 2 out of every 3 cars were a Chevrolet. GM
yeah,
has a massive presence
yeah,
in
Chevy, Chevy.
Uzbekistan. That was surprising. You know, when I saw the first 5 Chevrolets, my first car in college was a Chevy, so I kind of was surprised by that. Do this, Sanjar. I'm going to keep you on the spot. We have a few things that people are saying in the chat, but let's keep you on the spot so you can respond alongside. I'm going to read through the chats that are here. Richard has his hand raised, and so after I read through some of the chats, Richard, go ahead and come off of mute. Let's make sure that we can do
Yep.
that. But what we'll do is we'll actually have what we'll do is we'll have let me read some of these chats and we'll just go back and forth and have you ask your question. Let's see, what's the structure of the medical system is what Kim Johnson was saying earlier. David Nichols, the question that he had earlier, I'd like to ask, how does the Uzbek population feel about democracy, the rule of law, and the war in Ukraine is affecting the future plans in regards to those things? I can give you one. I mean, obviously that was top of my mind. You know, there's definitely strong support for Ukraine because Uzbekistan, like Ukraine and other countries that were formerly in the Soviet Union or under Soviet rule, they want to have their own sense of self, right? One of the things that was more painful that one of the people talked about, I won't identify directly, was the Soviet system was very anti-Muslim, and you know, people were not allowed to practice their own religion, and it's coming back. In fact, I got to visit um, three of the different mosques. I mean, I'm Christian. I'm a studier of in the Muslim religion. They refer to Jesus as Isa. I'm a student of
Yeah.
Isa or a follower of Isa versus the Prophet Muhammad. But it was interesting. I do know that that is really concerning to have like Uzbek speaking Uzbek the language. Sanjar, do you want to refer to anything about that? How? I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but thoughts or feelings about that?
You mean about Ukraine?
Ukraine and like being independent, the rule of law, things like that. Oh, I don't know if you're still
I
there.
mean,
If you,
I'm always stay neutral, you know. I never
yeah,
say, I never follow one um, rule or uh, position. I mean, of course, I have my own opinion about everything. Of course, we support the Ukrainians, and we don't like that war between Russian and Ukrainian. I mean, these 3 years, so many bad things happened in our lives, and it became usual things. You know, even if tomorrow will be a tsunami or something, will be like, oh, I mean, it was much better, bad, you know. And about religion, especially in Tashkent, a lot of majority of people they are following this Muslim things. In the regions they are not so religiously, and in Tashkent, a lot of people they go to masjids, and women they wear hijab and they pray 5 times in one day. And of course, before our independence, it was not like this. As I remember, when I was 10 years old, in my times, people were like people didn't go to masjids. Before that times was some terroristic attacks, terroristic groups, and people were scary to go to masjids. Before there been such people who were recording all people who is coming to masjid, who is going, who's doing what, you know. But now this is not like this. Everyone is have a own choice. Everyone is free. People can make the bird, big.
Yeah, they can.
To go to
It seemed
masjid.
like that they're much more able to do what they want to do, based on the questions that I asked. Like when I was when I was
Yep.
giving these 5 different speeches, people could say, would tell me examples of stories of how, they're now able to do more of that sort of stuff. I know we have a couple other questions. Let me flip it around, Sanjar, and we'll see what else we have here. Elbeck mentioned in the, prices are going up. Many Russian citizens are immigrating to Uzbekistan. It used to be that Uzbeks would go to to like Russia and to other places. And it's interesting. I think one of the things that surprised a lot of the Uzbeks is this feeling of, it surprised them that there's such a shift back and forth like that as well. That it's now people are coming to Uzbekistan versus the other way around. I know that's been interesting. So I know that Richard,
Yeah,
you've had your hand
payment
up.
for
Go,
rent.
go ahead. Payment for rent has gone up.
Yep.
Sanjar?
Yeah, gone up. Yes,
Kevin?
yes.
Yeah. Can I mention?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see what Richard was trying to say.
Okay.
Richard, just go ahead, say something.
I just wanted to ask you about the gaming industry in Uzbekistan and the possibility of finding people with experience creating projects in Unity game engine.
You know what? We had a couple different sites that were for job sites and stuff like that. I was kind of hoping that one of those entrepreneurs would join us. Some of the people when I look up over here, I've got Telegram, and they're like, "Oh wait, we forgot." Blah 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 blah, just because of the time of the day. Part of what I'll do, Richard, is if you give me if you can paste into the chat, a full message of what you'd like to look for. I'll put it into the 2 Telegram channels, and I think what we're gonna do is we'll take the 2 channels, we're gonna push them together, and create like one unified one, because I think there's enough people there that will be interested in having that back and forth. That would be great.
Okay, I'm driving right now, so I'll have to do that later.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, be careful. But yeah, it'd be great. The level of capability though is pretty high, and the main thing, like especially AI and logistics, are the 2 areas that I focused on a whole lot myself. But what we can do is we can find out more about that, because we'll have some follow-up type of activities. Well, let's do this. Because it's 12 and I just realized what time it was, and it's getting late in Tashkent, what we'll do is we'll have a place on the community website. It's community.techranch.com. If you're interested in signing up, anyone that's in the, most everyone that's listening to the streams and stuff like that is applicable. You do not have to you don't have to pay anything to be a part of a community. There is kind of a little application process because we just want to make sure that there are people that really want to be a part of our community in here. If you're in the studio audience, make sure you tell Jello about this. And you can just say in the chat, hey, I'm interested in being on. Here's my email address, and he'll invite you. If you're listening on one of the streams, like on LinkedIn, I know we have a number of people that are listening there as well. What we'll do is just post onto the stream or send us messages back and forth, and we'll make sure that we have that. We're going to put an actual. Now that we're going through the alpha process of working out how the community is working and stuff like that, we'll actually have an application process on the front end so that you can get more involved. And you won't have to wait on us to do it by hand, especially as we start ramping up the next stage. Because a lot of what the most valuable part, using the Uzbek language, the tanishbalish, the network, right? The power of the network, the power of your social capital, we really want to expand that. And now that I've gotten to spend some time having a bunch of tea with Sanjar and Kabir, and especially those two, about talking about their points of view about how to build that type of network, we'll be talking much more about that. I mean, the gift was definitely for me on the trip. I mean, I think that I ended up speaking a bunch of different times. But the gift ended up being for me about what happened. And like I mentioned at the very beginning of the program, about how every time I've traveled, it's opened my mind to how things might be in the world. But especially this trip was even much more so. And I want to thank especially our 4 Uzbek fellows, Sanjar, Kabir, Sarvara, and Maftuna, just because of what's happened and stuff like that. We'll go ahead and start the wrap up for today. And if you're in the studio audience and you didn't get the chance to speak earlier, but you'd like to just say hi real quick, stick around. Even when we close, we'll stick on just for a little bit longer so we can chat and stuff like that. But thank you to these 4 for making it such a special trip. Thank you to everyone else as well. Everyone that I met, everyone, and I'm talking about everything from the door guy at the hotel to the servers at the restaurant to the governor of one of the districts, was over the top hospitable. I've traveled a lot. I've never experienced that as widely as I did in this location. And so it was really touching. And with that, I'll be coming back to Uzbekistan. I already told them I was going to. I already know kind of some of the projects we're going to work on. So we'll talk more about that coming soon. But since it's after 12, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up for today. If you want to join our email list, our mentors, our country manager list, or our community, go to this website on this page, and the information for how to get involved will be there. And we'll hear a lot more about what's happening in the coming days. Next week, I'm going to be taking some time off, so I've asked one of our entrepreneurs named Denise to take the lead on the Tech Ranch program. So I don't know if I'm physically going to be close to the net for next week, just because I am taking a little bit of time off to reflect on what I just learned. I might or might not be here, but I'm going to hand the reins over to one of our other very capable entrepreneurs. So you can actually, if you come back next week, and then the week after that, that first week of November, I'll definitely be back, and we'll do a lot more integration across what, I'll give you some more updates about what's been happening between Texas and Uzbekistan, and as we launch the Uzbekistan-Texas bridge. So with that, we'll close up on the streams and say, it's always an honor to be a part of a group of entrepreneurs that are driven by vision and values around the world, embracing the world together. Let's go change the world for the better together. With that, have a great evening in Uzbekistan. Have a great day here in Texas or wherever in the world that you're at. Thank you all for joining today. Y'all take care.